Alright nerds, so this video is going to serve as a quick primer and introductory lesson to quantitative and qualitative analysis. And here we see the results of a titration, which is a particular type of quantitative analysis. So by the end of this, you should be able to differentiate between the different types of analysis and when they'll be necessary, when we want to use one as opposed to the other. So here's your vocabulary for the lesson. If I could just get you to pause the video, write this down, this will be useful as we move on through the lesson. So down to our right here, we have a very common example of qualitative analysis in chemistry, just here, which is the testing for cations and the precipitate tests. Now, qualitative analysis gives us a description of the content or the components or even the origins of certain chemicals within like a mixture or a sample that we have. The qualitative analysis describes the nature of the substance as opposed to how much of something there is. So examples of this include the flame test, precipitation test, and many instrumental tests. Now, some of these instrumental tests are both qualitative and quantitative, but we'll see that further down the course. Quantitative analysis, like that's what we often think of when we think of chemistry, as opposed to both of these, which are equally important. So quantitative analysis gives us measured amounts of certain substances. It tells us how much of something is in there. It usually has standard units or standardized values. And examples include volumetric analysis, which is the measuring of concentrations or volumes of liquids, gas usually. Or we have gravimetric analysis, which is measuring the mass or weight of certain substances, but we refer to it as mass. It's just use a balance which uses gravity to measure. That's why it's called gravimetric analysis. So we nearly always express these in standard units like grams or moles, or percentages. We can have absolute measures or relative measures. If we measure how many grams of something there is, that's an absolute measure. It is that many grams. If we measure the percentage of something, that's a relative measure. So for sample A certain percentage of it might be iron, a certain percentage of it might be copper. But that's a relative measurement. You're measuring it compared to the overall sample. We can have direct measures or indirect measure. A direct measure is we measure the value directly. So for a gravimetric analysis, we'll separate out one particular substance and we'll weigh it. An indirect measure is where we use that amount that we've just weighed and we compare it to what should be left over and we assume that's something else. Or alternatively, an indirect measure is if we want to know how much sulfate is in something, we'll combine it with magnesium. Magnesium sulfate's insoluble. So we can measure that, and then we take away out of that magnesium sulfate how much it would be magnesium. So we measure the magnesium sulfate directly, which gives us an indirect measure of the sulfate ions. So we can directly measure or indirectly measure, or we can measure absolutely, so an actual standard unit, or we can do a relative measure, which is a comparison or a percentage. Alright, I hope that made a lot of sense. If you didn't, put any questions you have in the comments below and we'll get to you as quick as we can. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe so any future videos pop up. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye now.